Stephen Interviews You. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Stephen Interviews You. This is episode number 24, and this is a series where I sit down and have a good chat with a very special guest, and his name would be, introduce yourself.
Uh, my name is Jason Kelly. I've been on Steven's channel before. We talked about UNLV sports and the bowl game between Ohio. I'm the host of the Let's Run podcast from Las Vegas, Nevada. Really grateful to be on the show, man. Thanks for having me.
Uh, Thanks for being back, Jason. And so let's just get right to it. Let's start with the podcast that you run. It's called the Let's Run podcast. What basically motivated you to start the Let's Run podcast in the very beginning? What really got it going?
Sure. I've just been a massive UNLV buff my whole life. When I was a kid, one of my favorite thing to do was to go to run and rebel basketball games. I actually didn't really care for UNLV football until recently. UNLV football was such an afterthought, but it's kind of ran in the family. My parents loved it. It was kind of a fun little date night for my mom and dad to do, and we eventually got into it. And UNLV has a fun basketball history. Had some good years back in the day, and so I kind of fell in love with it. And it's really I wasn't really a sports buff, and UNLV basketball and UNLV sports is what introduced me to my love for just sports at all levels, professional, college, high school. I just love sports. And so eventually I started law school and I realized that I was going to have a chance. I'd always wanted to do a podcast covering UNLV basketball specifically, but UNLV sports in general. And I realized after my first year of law school, I'd gotten married. I went to BYU in Provo. I'm a Mormon. And so I went there. I didn't go to UNLV from undergrad, but I realized I was going to have a chance to move back to Vegas to finish my law school at UNLV. And I said, that's a chance to start a podcast because I'll be in Vegas. I'll be at all the games. And I think that kind of is a prerequisite. I do think you kind of have to be going to games a little bit to cover the team as well as you can. At least for me, I always felt like I would have to do that. And so I realized I could start the podcast. UNLV basketball was frustrating me to no end. And so I kind of started the podcast because it was finally my chance to talk about UNLV sports. And I just have a passion for it. And I think that I have a work ethic and a desire to provide content that's pretty good. And I wanted to get our basketball coach fired. I thought our basketball coach was awful. And so another primary reason was to make sure that we got that guy fired as quickly as possible. And so, yeah, those were kind of the main motivations. And I've loved covering UNLV sports from a fan perspective. I have been approached, talked about doing it from a media member perspective. I like that separation. I do not want to be tied to the school. I don't think the school particularly wants to be tied to me. To be honest with you, because I just say things that people won't say in ways that people won't say them. But I love it. I graduated from law school at UNLV, and the Let's Run podcast is really just like my favorite hobby that I have of all of my hobbies, because I'm a big hobby guy, and the Let's Run podcast is easily my favorite.
So, since you know all about UNLV and the Las Vegas area, and this topic has been popping up here and there at times about UNLV. If you could summarize the history of UNLV sports in general, uh, what would you say mainly jumps out about it? Is Las Vegas considered to be like a real college town, or is it something else?
Well, it's kind of an interesting history. So Las Vegas, if you think about it as a city, really, like, I think Las Vegas had like 50,000 people living in it in the 1950s. And to go from that, in like 65 years to a 3 million person metropolitan area is just like insanity growth for an area. And Las Vegas as a city, my my ancestors arrived in southern Nevada. I shouldn't say Las Vegas proper, because they were actually in a town called St. Thomas and a couple of other places. St. Thomas was the town that was flooded when Hoover Dam was created, and so my grandma was born in that town. But my family arrived in the late 1890s, early 1890s in the southern Nevada area. And so, Las Vegas wasn't really a real city for a really long time. In fact, Boulder City, where Hoover Dam is was a bigger city than Las Vegas, and really didn't get going until the 50s. And they realized they needed a university. The only university that the state of Nevada had was Reno, up in Reno, Nevada. And so the university was founded kind of late 50s, early 60s. It went through a bunch of different iterations and then kind of became a full-fledged university as the city kept growing. And the administration, the football side of it was always kind of difficult, but they made a great hire and they hired Jerry Tarkanian to be our basketball coach. The history of UNLV is a basketball history. Jerry Tarkanian took the Rebels to a bunch of Final Fours. They won a national championship. They have maybe the greatest college team ever assembled in the 1991 UNLV Running Rebels. In fact, UNLV is still the last group non-power school to win a national championship in either football or basketball, with the 90 team, with the 90 Running Rebels, which is 30 or 40 years ago at this point. It's a long time ago, but um, and as Las Vegas has changed and become more corporate, you have seen professional teams kind of start to move in. But for a long time, the Running Rebels were the best show in town. And locals of Las Vegas, you have to understand that the people who live here, especially before it became, because Las Vegas has really taken off in the last 20 years. I think it went from 1 million to 3 million in like less than 20 years, which is just crazy. And the people that were here were people that worked on the strip, and a lot of Mormons, to be honest with you. Like there was a bunch of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I guess that's how we prefer to be called. And that's kind of my ancestry here. There were a ton of them, and we were the accountants for the casinos. We worked in the casinos, and it wasn't a traditional college town, because the gambling side of it was always kind of frowned upon, and I think we always drew greater scrutiny because of our proximity to gambling. But as the professional sports have kind of moved in, specifically the Knights made a huge difference on Running Rebel basketball, kind of taking over a lot of people's, and then the mass shooting, of course, the community really rallied behind the Golden Knights. And as it's become more professional, I mean, it's never been much of a college town, but the Running Rebels have kind of fallen into the back burner, into the shadows of Las Vegas sports, which is kind of sad. Whereas UNLV football, because of the arrival of the Raiders, we got to play in Allegiant Stadium. And that changed UNLV football forever and really turned it into, we've kind of flipped. Now we've kind of become a football school, which UNLV football was one of the 5 worst Division I college football programs for 50 or 60 years. I think UNLV, you could not find a worse college football program. I mean, Akron would pray, we would pray to be Akron, essentially, is what I'm saying. And so it's a really interesting history. We've definitely become more corporate over the last few years. And in some ways that's benefited UNLV in college. I mean, enrollment's doing well, but UNLV, you have to understand, is on the strip. This is not a university that's kind of, in a smaller town in the suburbs of the city of Las Vegas. I mean, this is a university that is less than like a mile and a half from the strip, like a mile maybe. It's right next to the airport. I mean, this university is in the middle of the most valuable real estate in the world. And that has its positives, for sure. When you fly into Vegas, you're on UNLV's campus, but it also brings problems of homelessness around the campus. I mean, it's not in a great area of town. So it's a very unique school. It's a very unique athletic history, a very prominent one. I mean, I'm still really proud of our athletic history, and I'm proud of what our football program has become. I mean, there's still some growing pains there, for sure, as you saw in that bowl matchup versus Ohio. But it's really fun.
Yeah. So speaking of the football program and just about the football program, UNLV, aside, of course, from playing in Allegiant Stadium now, which has certainly helped them, uh, what other things could you point at and just say, yeah, those were the things that made UNLV football improve over the last few years? What were some of the things that really got it going in the right way?
So a couple of things. One, the university realized, basketball was how this university buttered its bread for so long. It's how it made its money. Football was a money loser for UNLV for a lot of its history, for most of its history. And so we were just basketball oriented. And we kind of realized that in the conference realignment world, in the it just in the hierarchy of college sports and college athletics, football is king. And while it's fun to have a fun basketball program, if you're going to have a D1 football program, you might as well have it be a good one. There's no reason, if you're going to be Gonzaga and just be or Grand Canyon and just be a basketball school, fine. But if you're going to have a D1 football program, you might as well have a real D1 football program. And so, probably the rumbling started probably in like 2014, 2013 range. UNLV ended up hiring Tony Sanchez, who I believe is he still the coach at New Mexico State? I'm not 100% sure. He's been a head coach since he was at UNLV. But if you're aware of Las Vegas, there's a very famous high school in Las Vegas called Gorman High School. It's national power. And Gorman is partly funded by the Fertittas. And the Fertittas are a family that are heavily invested in the Houston Rockets and Houston athletics as well. Very, very, very rich billionaire. And they were very close friends with that high school coach. And so UNLV went out on a limb and hired Tony Sanchez, a high school football coach, to be the head coach of the UNLV football program. And with that, secured a huge level of funding for a practice facility to kind of, because UNLV had some of the worst facilities in all of college football. And we got a 30 or $40 million pledge from the Fertitta family to build this football training complex. And at the same time, when the Raiders were dealing with their stadium issues and just with Oakland being not a great place to be, there became a pretty clear opportunity for an NFL team to come to the city of Las Vegas. And part of this, the Board of Regents, the state of Nevada realized that this was an opportunity for UNLV football because, again, like I just said, UNLV's on the Strip. We're not talking about we're not talking about a stadium. When UNLV football plays at Allegiant Stadium, they don't have to drive very far to get to it. This is not like a stadium that's miles and miles and miles away, like the University of Miami deals with. Memphis is even a little bit further, I believe. And there's a few schools that play in professional stadiums. I believe USF is playing in a stadium a long way from their campus. This is not a stadium that's far away from our campus. And so, as a condition for the Raiders getting public funding to build Allegiant Stadium, one of the conditions was that UNLV football would share Allegiant Stadium with the Raiders. And the Board of Regents were very smart about that. And the university leadership was very smart about that. And getting Allegiant Stadium, getting a world-class, multi-billion-dollar stadium to play in was a tool that allowed UNLV to attract better coaches. And eventually it finally clicked with Barry Odom after a couple of years with Marcus Arroyo, who's the offensive coordinator down there in Arizona State right now. He was our previous head coach before Barry Odom. And now finally with Dan Mullen, it's really taken off. And the city leveraging the Raiders coming to kind of boost UNLV football was a big key of that. I wish it didn't come at the expense of UNLV basketball, but it has. Anyway, that's kind of how UNLV football went from being a doormat to being a very respectable college football program with a lot of potential.
Right. So, sticking to UNLV sports, I've noticed this whenever these two schools are talked about, UNLV and, as most people know them as, Nevada, but you guys call them Reno. There's obviously some sort of backstory behind that because there's like some sort of like in-state rivalry between the two schools. Could you fill me in on that? Could you take me through that?
Absolutely. So Reno University, and we're a little cheeky about this because the world does know them as we don't say the N word on my channel.
Right.
We don't call them that. I don't
Gotcha.
that's a joke, obviously, referring to the state of Nevada. But the Reno University, UNR is their official title, University of Nevada, Reno. And when UNLV was, and they were the only university in Nevada for 70 years. UNR started in the late 1800s. I mean, it was it's a very old institution. And so when UNLV was created, so it's University of Nevada, Reno, University of Nevada, Las Vegas. It's two parts of the same umbrella, essentially. I mean, it's the same school system, the Nevada school system. And so UNLV has always said, well, you're not Nevada, you're Reno, and we have no problem if they want to call us Las Vegas. Perfectly fine with that. We're happy to be called Las Vegas. If you don't want to be called what you are, which is Reno, then that must say something about the city of Reno. And there's always been a very bitter rivalry between the South and the North in the state of Nevada. Because the North was kind of the more established, and obviously, there's a little bit of controversy because we also literally played into that with some Civil War stuff with our original mascot, which was a Confederate soldier. We were the South rebelling against the North. We got rid of that mascot, thankfully, a lot earlier than Ole Miss did, by the way. And so essentially, we were rebelling against. That's why we're the Rebels. We were rebelling against the University of Nevada, Reno, and so we think that both universities are the University of Nevada. One's for Reno and one's Las Vegas. We have no problem calling ourselves UNLV. They should have no problem calling themselves UNR. And the North does not like that the South of Nevada is the only really relevant part of the state. As which has changed. I mean, 80 years ago, it wasn't that way. Reno was the relevant part of the state. But now, the state is controlled by the city of Las Vegas. The city of Las Vegas is like 70% of the state of Nevada's population. And so there's just a rivalry there. It is very fun to remind them. I always say, Tyrion Lannister, I don't know if you've watched Game of Thrones, Stephen.
I have not.
Okay. Well, one of my favorite quotes from Tyrion Lannister is, never forget what you are, wear it like armor, and it cannot be used to hurt you. And I would just tell the city of Reno, never forget that you are Reno and that we are Las Vegas. Wear it like armor, and it can't be used to hurt you. Just embrace it. And so, yeah, we do not like that they get called Nevada because there are two universities of Nevada. That's a long answer to a big question, but anyway.
Yeah, that was just a fun question I had to ask because I notice it all the time, especially when I listen to your podcast. So I just
Yeah,
had to ask that.
it's very much on purpose. Very
Yeah,
much on purpose.
yeah.
Yeah.
So moving on to still related to UNLV and talking more about conference realignment, particularly with the Mountain West Conference. With uh, UNLV, they played their games, in that conference. Um, what are your thoughts on the Mountain West Conference as a whole? Where do you think UNLV stands being in the Mountain West Conference? Should they still be in the Mountain West Conference? Where do you see this all winding up for UNLV and conference realignment?
So I think the best answer that I can give is the most boring answer, which is I don't know. Um, and I think that while that is a boring answer, it's also kind of universal across college sports. We don't know if a super league is going to be formed. We don't know if the Big Ten and SEC are going to break apart and basically force all the rest of us into a different division of college football. We don't really know that. And the new Mountain West is a reasonable conference. It's not great by any means. It's not good. We lost 5 of our best brands when the Pac-12 poached them away and created the new a new group of 6 conference called the Pac-12. But what is my opinion of the new Mountain West? I think it's UNLV obviously could have jumped to the Pac-12 if they wanted to. They did not want to. There was a lot of egos involved in that decision. People in Vegas were just like, let's just merge. Why are we doing this? Why are you guys trying to split apart? And I think that it led to just a lot of hurt feelings. And the Mountain West came in and said, hey, we'll pay you $15 million cash payment this summer, if summer 2026, if you'll stay in the conference. We'll give you an extra $1.5 million on top of whatever media deal we get. And you can leave the Mountain West for a power conference whenever you want for free, no exit fee, and you don't have to give back any of the money. And UNLV said, we want to go to a power conference. We don't want to go to the Pac-12. That's a group of 6 conference, and those schools are idiots anyway. Why do we want to be a part of them? And so you're looking at the new Mountain West. I think that it has a chance. I mean, you look at some of the football brands in it. Obviously, none of them are Boise State. UNLV isn't Boise State. That's definitely the class of the group of 6. But beneath Boise State, I don't really think that the football separation is that big between the new Mountain West and the new Pac-12, or even the new Mountain West and I think the Americans, the clear class of the group of 6 right now. Until proven otherwise. If the Pac-12 wants to claim they're the best group of 6 conference, they're going to have to be better than the American, and they haven't proven that yet. And they can't prove it yet, so I guess we'll see in due good time. But I think that the new Mountain West, you look at Hawaii. Hawaii had a good year, very fun team, a very unique brand. I don't really like playing Hawaii because we have to travel to to the Hawaiian Islands, which sucks. You have Wyoming, which is maybe the most difficult college football, Division I college football stadium in the country to get to. Um, but I mean, that program has had a lot of 8-win seasons. You have a service academy in the Air Force Falcons, which I hate playing because they play the stupid triple option, but you do have to respect them, and they get a lot of 10-win seasons. You have New Mexico, who's clearly taking football a lot more seriously, and San Jose State, who has a serious football coach, and Ken, I always mispronounce his name, but Neo Mataolo. And so it's a reasonable football conference. It's fine. If UNLV can, I guess we'll see what happens with all this Super League conference stuff, conference realignment stuff. I think it's kind of all up in the air. But I will say, if UNLV is still in the Mountain West Conference in 2032, I'm already upset they didn't join the Pac-12 in the first place. I thought they should have just killed the Mountain West and just created one Group of 6 conference and on the Group of 5 conference on the West Coast. But if they're still in the Mountain West in 2032, it's time to burn down UNLV's campus. I'm not calling for arson, but I would be very upset, and I am upset already that this is the course of action that they chose to remain in the Mountain West. But if we're still in the Mountain West in 2032, there's some pretty big problems because I am not happy with remaining in this conference, especially on the basketball side.
Yeah. So speaking of the Pac-12, which the Mountain West has had issues with lately, and we're going to be very brief about this, and we've also commented on this over time, but the lawsuit between the Mountain West and the Pac-12, that's still ongoing, I believe. And if you could sum that up briefly, what would you think about that lawsuit? What do you think is really going on there?
Yeah, so there's two separate lawsuits. I am actually an attorney, which I always kind of forget now. I am actually an attorney here in Nevada, so just so you know, this isn't legal advice. But I feel like when you're a new attorney, you feel like you have to say that just to make sure that people understand that what you're saying
Right.
is just your legal opinion. But there are two separate lawsuits, one between the Pac-12 as a conference and the Mountain West. Essentially, when the Pac-12 died, the Mountain West created a scheduling agreement with the Pac-12, which allowed Oregon State and Washington State to play Mountain West teams. And there was provision in that if the Pac-12 as a conference were to take Mountain West schools, there would be a poaching fee of about $12 million, $11 million per school that they took. And so 5 schools obviously were taken by the new Pac-12 from the Mountain West. So there's a lawsuit over that $55 million roughly fee between the Pac-12 and the Mountain West. The Pac-12 says we shouldn't have to pay that. The Mountain West says, yes, you should. And then there's a separate lawsuit about the exit fees. Now, exit fees are standard for every conference. They all do them. Oftentimes, these exit fees are negotiated down depending on the negotiating position of the parties. For example, Texas and Oklahoma had a lot of power when they were leaving the Big 12 because they're Texas and Oklahoma. So each scenario with exit fees, which are just standard, are going to be different. The Mountain West had in their bylaws had that your exit fee was 3 times your distribution, which was about $6 million, $7 million in total for the Mountain West schools leaving per year when they're leaving. So it's about $18 to $22 million per school per year. I mean, that's about 100. It's close to $100 million. So it's $155 million at stake between the two lawsuits. Each lawsuit is different in terms of the strengths and weaknesses of the parties, but they're kind of treated as one lawsuit, even though they're two separate lawsuits. What's the positioning going to be? The thing is, the Mountain West has been withholding the distributions of these 5 schools leaving. So the Mountain West already actually is in possession of something like $80 to $100 million of the money of the schools that are leaving anyway. The Mountain West already has that money. And so, in terms of that 100 million part of the lawsuit, I wouldn't expect the Mountain West to accept anything less than they're withholding already. So, I mean, I think the baseline for what the Mountain West is going to get starts around $80 million would be my guess of the $155 million in dispute. And the other $55 million lawsuit from the Pac-12, I don't know. I don't know how much is going to be. I mean, I feel pretty confident that the Mountain West is going to be able to collect on the exit fees of the departing schools, a decent chunk of it. But as for the poaching fees, they're not super common. In contract law, courts can be dubious of enforcing poaching fees. And so, frankly, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I would give if the Mountain West could get 30% of that $55 million, if they could walk away with $20 million, $18 million of that 55, I would accept that in a settlement agreement. Ultimately, I think this will settle at some point. The Mountain West put these financial roadblocks in place because they knew that the Pac-12 would try and take schools from them, and the goal would be to bankrupt the Pac-12 essentially over this 5-year period, that 2031 to 2032, 2026 to 2032 period. And depending on what the court decides, I think the Mountain West has a really good chance of financially kneecapping the Pac-12 and the schools in the Pac-12 based on the current status of the lawsuits. So Mountain West, of the 155 million, I guess I'll just summarize. I think they'll get at least 80. It could be as high as something like 110, 120. Best case scenario, that would be crazy if they did. 110 probably would be the ceiling, I would say. I would give the Mountain West I'd give the Mountain West the edge in the negotiating position between the two. It's complicated. I have done many videos on my channel breaking it down, and I hope that the Pac-12 schools, which I think made an idiotic decision, I hope that all of their financials are terrible, and they should be because they made a dumb choice. So there you go.
Yep. Yeah, so obviously I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the specifics about all these lawsuits. I can only go by what I hear. So when I get, you know, a comment like yours, it's like, yes, it gives me more clarity as to what's, going on. So I do appreciate that. So anyway, we're gonna wrap it up with this one last question here, and it's just about college football in general with the college football playoff and the governance. I'm going to keep it to that. Um, we're right now at 12 teams for the college football playoff, the tournament structure. Um, and we've been hearing some chatter about, oh, it might go up to 16 teams, or it might go up to 24 teams, or some other number. Uh, in your opinion, Jason, where do you see that going? Where do you see the college football playoff going within a few years from now? Um, and what do you think about governance? What's going on there with enforcement of rules? Because a lot of it just looks like one big mess. If you want me to be honest with you.
Yeah. Frankly, my opinion of it's pretty bleak. I'll start with kind of the bigger governance picture, and then I'll
Yeah,
kind of go
go
into
ahead.
the minutia of the college football playoff itself. My view of it's pretty bleak. I think that this is a huge problem, obviously, which everybody knows, with no solution, with no clear solution. And the only way for a solution to actually come forth, I mean, there have been plenty of whether it be a super league, whether it be a congressional, a bill passed by Congress, whether it be the NCAA, regaining some sort of power. There have been a lot of solutions presented. I don't think any of them are practical, any of them right now. And people want this, college football issue, this college sports issue to be resolved in the next, 5 years or so. They want it to kind of be in a more sustainable form. But I guess I'll start. Congress, I don't see Congress coming up with anything. I really don't. Again, we're going to have midterms here soon. You're going to see, unless one party can get like 85% of the House and 70% of, like Congress is built to be in gridlock for a reason. The founding fathers made it very difficult to pass legislation that affected every single citizen in the country, which a college sports bill technically would. They wanted us to govern ourselves within our states. And so the system is built for gridlock. If you're relying on Congress to come up with something, I think you're just gonna be disappointed. And even if they do come up with something, it's not going to be what you want. So, I've seen people say, well, they need to unionize. We need to allow student athletes to unionize, and that will allow there to be enforcement mechanisms. I actually agree with that. I think if college athletes could unionize, it would make, because part of the good things about unionization, and you would need Congress to do, you would need a congressional act to do this, by the way, is because you can enforce rules against members of your union. If Terry Rozier is betting on games in the NBA, the NBA Players Association can come down and enforce rules against them. Part of the issue with the current form of college sports is that there's no enforcement mechanisms. Nobody has the power to say, no, you can't do that. The only people that have real power in college sports seems to be judges at the current point in time, and that's not sustainable either. And so people will say, oh, well, they need to unionize. And I say, well, there's some big problems there. Do you allow every college athlete to be a part of this union? If you do, each of them are probably going to have some claim for some minimum share of revenue. If you want to try and treat them as employees, you're going to have to pay them possibly minimum wage. I mean, can you imagine if every student athlete across the country also had to be compensated as an employee? You know, I think that really complicates things because not all sports actually generate revenue. In fact, not even football and basketball are generating a lot of revenue nationwide right now. So you're basically going to be asking every athletic department to operate in the red. Then there's the issue of Title IX and women's sports. Are you going to pay female basketball players the same as male basketball players? One of those generates money, the other loses money. How are you supposed to pull that off? So this congressional thing of allowing unionization and categorizing student athletes as employees, I think it's completely impractical. I don't see it happening. And maybe it could happen, but it's 20 to 30 years away, not 5 to 10. It would take 20 or 30 years of other things, other dominoes falling. I just think it's too big of a time frame for people to have this all fixed by 2031 like people want it to be fixed by. Then there's, well, is there going to be a super league? There's so many issues with a super league. How many teams are going to be in the super league? We're all technically members of, so that's one solution, the congressional solution. Now we're on the super league solution. Every single member of the FBS has rights as a member of the FBS. And, if you're a school, say like Wake Forest, and you're going to get left behind in this new super league, you have rights as a member of the FBS to prevent that from happening. Not to mention there's going to be like 70 or 80 schools that are going to be left behind. Or you think they're just going to allow themselves to be relegated? No, they're not. And equally, the Big Ten and SEC do not respect each other or like each other at all. Are they really going to come to the table and agree on equal revenue sharing, which is going to have to be a part of a super league? I don't see that happening either. Which teams are going to be involved? Which teams aren't going to be involved? We're talking about different agendas across 50 different states and different political ideologies all trying to bind together to create something that is just, as of right now, completely impractical. And I don't think it's going to be practical 5 years from now. I think, again, like I said, this is a 10 or a 20-year thing, unless you can trust Congress, which has the lowest approval rating of any group of any body in the history of the world, frankly. Unless you're relying on them, which is not going to happen. A super league also doesn't work because there's too many competing agendas. Likewise, with the group of six, people say, oh, the group of six shouldn't be allowed in the college football playoff. It's like, are you really going to relegate the group of six to a lower division? I get it. UNLV and Ohio State don't play the same brand of football. They do not play the same level of football, but they're both members of the FBS. If you're a group of six team, are you really going to accept getting relegated down to a lower league? You'd have to get, what's that worth? If I was UNLV and a member of the group of six and the power conferences came to me and said, we want you to go away. Here's some money. Let's talk about how much money. I would say, okay, maybe 20, 30 billion. We would accept that maybe as an adequate settlement for being basically shoved into the oblivion. There's no way to adequately compensate the group of six for not being allowed in the college football playoff. So ultimately, where's this actually going to go? I'm just going to say, I don't think any of the solutions to fix college football are going to work. Where's this going to go? It's going to go to a 2014 playoff. You're going to see college football turn into something much more comparable to March Madness, which is basically what they already did when they expanded it to 12 teams anyway. We're basically just not doing a half measure anymore. We're just doing a full measure. You're going to see this go to 24 teams. You're going to see 4 automatic bids for each Power 4 conference, and then 8 at-large bids, something along the lines of that. I mean, it might be more automatic bids for the Big Ten and the SEC, of course. The details of that we'll see. But that, I think, is going to be the short-term fix. I think you might see 2 group of 6 teams have a chance. I'm not saying they're going to get automatic bids, but you could see scenarios where if the rankings work out certain ways, you could see 2 group of 6 teams in the college football playoff of the 24. And we're just going to be in limbo, and we are going to be in this wild, wild west forever. This is going to be our new normal. I don't think anything's going to be fixed about it. And I think it's going to be 20 years at least before real changes are actually implemented. And that's only going to be after people have stopped giving money to these fiscally irresponsible college football programs. And they're going to have to change how they operate. That's eventually going to be what breaks the camel back. I mean, fans cannot be a well a limitless well of money. I don't see that happening. So that's kind of my prediction. I went on a long time about that, but I wanted to give my thoughts on it.
No, that's totally okay, and I definitely share the same thoughts as you, Jason, when it comes to this. Whether you root for a school like UNLV or in my case, Ohio, or any Group of Six school, uh, you want to feel like you have a chance at it, no matter how many teams there are at the college football playoff. And I don't see why not when it comes to having more than one Group of Six school in the equation if we're going to go to 24 teams. So, and the whole thing about governance, like I said, it's one big mess. So it's just something that we have to just keep an eye on. Really, we
Yeah.
just do. But anyway, guys, for those of you watching this, I will provide a link in the description box below that will take you to the Let's Run podcast run by Jason Kelly. He does a fantastic job of hosting that show. If you need any information about UNLV related topics, he's your guy. Go to his channel. I highly encourage you guys to subscribe to him. And that will conclude this episode of Stephen Interviews You, number 24, episode number 24. And we'll be back soon enough with more interview related content. Thank you guys so much for watching this show, and we'll be back soon enough. Take care, guys.